Hey guys, I'm Daisho, and before I get started with this game, I do have to say that although the camera angle is really bad now, it'll get fixed in a couple of minutes, so don't really worry about it, and I'll be able to share what's going on. But anyway, I keep a questionable hand here, so before I even get anywhere in this deck, I knew that my opponent was playing a life gain deck that doesn't really have answers, but it has a lot of life gain. And I mean, he basically just took any card in the deck, or any card that he could find that gained him life. And it was really interesting because he didn't just, I mean, he played some just random life gain spells, but a lot of them were like Captured Sunlight, which also cascades into something, or even Rift Watcher, which is a 2/3 flyer, Suture Priest, which can also go ahead and kill me. So, I mean, there was a lot of life gain spells and a lot of stall cards, but also a lot of pretty decent ways to kill people. So that's how he made it to the finals. And yeah, anyway, so I decided to go on the play in this matchup because I knew what deck he was playing, and I was actually worried about milling because I knew that his deck had a lot of life gain, not necessarily that many answers. So if I could just keep the game going on as long as possible, then, or basically he wanted to keep the game going on as long as possible, while I just wanted to play 3/3s and 4/4s and kill him with them. But it doesn't start out that well since I keep a 2-lander on the play, I think, and I didn't have a divination, so it's going to be pretty hard for me to actually get any lands. So anyway, it's going to be my turn 3 where I miss my 4th land drop, and I'm just going to drop a Runner's Bane on his Loam Dweller, which is basically just a 2/2. And now, I mean, he's got 2 power on the board, plus, and one of them has life link, sort of. The Morning Thrall is a 1/1 that has whatever old lifelink was. It wasn't called lifelink, but you know, the usual. But it's definitely not looking good. I've got 7 cards in my hand and 7 spells, but I need to be able to cast them if I want to win. But then again, I mean, against his board, I don't really have the worst situation. I don't want to get down to like 5 life, because at that point then I'll only have a couple more creatures that I can play. I have like 1 card in my deck that can remove his Suture Priest from the board, so I basically will be at the point where I always have to have more creatures than him, and then I can't play any more creatures, so it would be a pretty awkward position to be put in. But rather than discard here, I think I just unsummon his Zarichi Tiger, which is really bad. So, I mean, whenever you get to that point, it's really, you're just in bad shape. So, it might, I mean, it's definitely partially because my deck is not designed 100% perfectly. I don't really have too many things lower on the curve, and even just my 3 drops, I don't really want to be playing them on turn 3 a lot. But yeah, here, one of my friends kindly fixes the camera angle so that you guys can actually see the whole board instead of just half of it. But anyway, I mean, I just end up unsummoning the Zarichi Tiger, and yeah, it's really just not an ideal use of mana, and it kind of sucks. But I mean, you got to do what you got to do. If I didn't cast that spell, I would have had to discard. And I mean, I think that there's actually an argument that I should have just played the Sting Scourger instead. Though I do take an extra damage from the Suture Priest, I gain it back because then he can't attack me with the Suture Priest next turn. And even though I have to let it die next turn, it's still pretty good because then I get to keep my unsummon around, which would be better because now I could cast it here, and because I draw Divination and then I draw a land, and then I could have unsummoned something and I wouldn't have had to discard. So that would have been a little better. Instead, I just ended up discarding, I think, a Berserkers of Bloodridge. But yeah, I definitely think that I played that turn a little bit wrong. I was thinking, well, I don't want to play the Sting Scourger here because then it'll die. But really what I was doing is just casting Unsummon, except instead I was wasting the Unsummon that might actually be useful, the one that only costs 1 mana and is an instant, and instead was holding on to the sorcery speed one, because obviously in this kind of game, if I do get to 4 mana, then I'm going to be casting spells for the rest of the game. I'm never going to be at the point where I'm just going to be paying echo costs. That's not anything. I don't have enough time to do that. So anyway, he's just going to drop an Aven Rift Watcher here, and as well as a Voracious Worm with 6+1 or 4+1/+1 counters to make it a 6/6. And I mean, yeah, the unsummon would have been pretty cool here. I could have just unsummoned that back, but still, I mean, he's got the Rift Watcher and all those random creatures on the board, so it would be very, very hard for me to get anywhere near back into this game. Especially, like, I can't start racing him because he's at 30 and he's gaining life. I can't start guying up because, I mean, he's got a bigger creature than anything that I can provide. So I'm just going to concede the game. I probably could have survived 1 or 2 more turns like Sting Scourge the worm. The only problem with that is then I don't even have another play. Oops, sorry, getting a phone call. I'll pause the recording and I'll be right back. Oh, no, wow. That was really weird. Okay, anyway, my phone rang, but they hung up right away. Okay, so anyway, my opponent's going to lead off. This game, I decided that it wasn't worth trying to be on the aggressive. I just needed to stick to my strategy, which I had been playing for the entire game, or the entire match, which was just to try and draw as many cards as possible with divinations or with just being on the draw first. And interestingly enough, my opponent has a very similar start to the last game. Last game, he led off with 3 planes into a Selesnya Cluestone, and this game he leads off with 3 forests into a Selesnya Cluestone. But I don't really have much going on early, which makes me happy that he didn't have as aggressive of a start. If you can call playing a Cluestone on turn 3 after like a Suture Priest that aggressive. But it was, I mean, he still got a couple of guys out on turn 4, which was pretty good for him. But anyway, I'm just going to play the Scimitar, which is cool because it could be a pretty decent blocker. And then my opponent plays Sprouting Phytohydra, which is just god-awful for me. Whenever it's dealt damage, or maybe it's combat damage, I don't know, you get a copy of it, which also has the same text. So that's just ridiculous. And the even more ridiculous thing is that I actually have the perfect answer right in my hand right here. I've got my Ogre Gatecrasher, comes into play, destroy target creature with Defender. I think they're both Kamigawa cards, but if they weren't, then I would probably think that this is one of the first time that this play has ever been made, where somebody's like, Ogre Gatecrasher, kill your Sprouting Phytohydra, but they might have been played in the same draft format, and then people could have sideboarded this in, or maybe they were already playing the Hill Giant, which was sort of the situation here, although the real reason I was playing was because it was a rogue. But fortunately for me, my opponent is stuck on white sources. He's only got 1 of them, so he can't really cast all the white spells that he wants, and he can't like play a white spell and gain life with Zerichi Tiger, so it's definitely limiting his options here. And again, fortunately for me, I'm just hitting all my land drops. I mean, that's the biggest thing here, is that I'm able to hit all these land drops and cast all my spells on time. And I mean, if I had been able to do that in the last game, I probably would have been okay, and I probably would have been able to halt his offensive. But in the way it turned out is I couldn't cast the spells that I needed to on time. So, I mean, that's been happening to me a lot in this draft, where I've been drawing the right spells at the right time. It's partially because of the fact that I do have I have some draw spells. I've got like Thought Flare. Well, Thought Flare is not really that useful, but Divinations, Train of Thought, stuff like that. And I've been drawing every game instead of playing every time that I win the die roll. But yeah, anyway, my opponent's going to drop an Aven Rift Watcher here. And again, he can't gain life with his Zerichi Tiger, which is really sweet for me. And yeah, definitely really useful. And this turn is pretty funny. I've got a bunch of cards in hand, but not really much to do because, or no, this turn. Let's see. Yeah, I've got 5 mana out. 5 mana or 6? No, I must have 6 mana here. Maybe this is not the turn that I was thinking of, but yeah, I mean, I've got some cards that I have in hand, but not really anything that I want to play. I want to save like my Claustrophobia for if my opponent plays a really important spell, and I want to save my Sting Scourger for if he plays an enchantment or something like that. So I'm just going to play this Flameborn Viron. This wasn't in the original deck, but I sideboarded it in just so that I would actually have a way to kill my opponent, because I knew that he'd be gaining a lot of life, so playing a 6/4 would be really good. I also sideboarded in the Magefire Wings because I didn't think that my opponent would have that many answers to my deck. I think that he just had a lot of life gain and some stall cards, but he would have trouble dealing with like 4 or 5 power, or I guess they would be 6 or 7 power once they get the wings on them. Creatures with flying, I think he would have trouble with that. But anyway, he draws the second white source, except it's in the form of a Transguild Promenade, so he's not going to be able to do anything with it this turn. And this is the turn where I drew a Runner's Bane, so I've got Claustrophobia, Runner's Bane, and Sting Scourger in hand, which is a pretty good hand, but not really anything that I want to do. So instead of trying to do something like that with those cards, I'm just going to equip my Shimmering Glaskite with the Scimitar, but it gets countered the first time, and then I'm going to do it again, and obviously this one's going to resolve, but it's really important that I do get this thing on my Shimmering Glaskite, because it is First of all, I can still activate it, and it'll fall off the glass kite, which is really bad, because then it'll cost me another 4 to put it back on if I want to block next turn. But it allows me to get through the Aven Riftwatcher. So the Riftwatcher was previously holding off my glass kite, but now it's a 3 power, and it's a 3/8 or something ridiculous like that. But yeah, my opponent is just going to, what is he doing? He's cracking his elixir, I think. Yeah, he just paid 1. I think maybe he paid 2. I don't know, whatever. But he had plenty of mana open anyway. But he just cracked his elixir so he could get his Phytohydra back in his deck, and so that he could get a little bit closer, or gain some more life back, because I just hit him for a bunch of damage down to 9 life, and he's not looking too good because he has no real. I mean, I guess he probably should have just double blocked my Viren last turn, my 6 power dude. He would have lost both of his dudes, but I mean, losing the Riftwatcher is not terrible for him, because he gains a couple life and it's about to go away anyway. So if he could trade off, then that would be pretty good. But I mean, then again, he still has to deal with my board some way, and he doesn't really have any good ways to do that. But anyway, right now he is going to cast a Silverclaw Griffin, and I think he paid 1 too much mana for that. He paid 6 mana, including the Cluestone. But I don't really know if that matters, because it's only a 5-drop, I think. I don't think there's anything that's making it more expensive. But anyway, I just draw land here. Not the most useful of things, but if you notice what's going on, my opponent has 1 green mana up, and I have 12 power on the board, and he's got 3 creatures. And if you remember my hand from when I was discussing it, it's a Stink Scourger, a Runner's Bane, and a Claustrophobia. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I guess, hope that my opponent's not playing Fog, because this play kind of doesn't make much sense if I'm not about to win the game. But yeah, I'm just going to bounce a creature for no value. Just like randomly bounce this creature. Then I'm going to Runner's Bane the Aven Riftwatcher, and Claustrophobia the Silverclaw Griffin. So I basically just tap all or bounce all his dudes and then just get in there and swing for lethal. So that was actually a really fun turn, mainly because my opponent thought he would be able to survive a couple more turns by blocking, or maybe even have a chance in there. But then I'm just like, no, I've got all these spells in my hand that actually do things. And I don't know, it was a pretty interesting turn, but it wasn't that impressive or anything. Anyway, let's move on to the final game. So my opponent puts me on the play, because obviously it worked for him the first game, and he wants me to draw as few cards as possible. And I keep a suspect hand. I've got his Bone Splitter, but the only land I have is a Desolate Lighthouse and an island. And I guess I'll talk a little bit about Desolate Lighthouse and why it was just god-awful in my deck. I almost never needed the ability on it. I think I activated it once this entire event, and it really had a pretty big cost in my deck. I had a couple of double blue spells that I wanted to cast on time. I also had Dominus of Fealty, which costs a blue mana. So there were actually multiple games where I couldn't cast it on time, just because the land that I did draw was Desolate Lighthouse. In addition to the fact that I would have rather had more islands and mountains, or one more of either in the deck, just to cast my spells on time. So anyway, my opponent's getting off to a pretty sweet start here. He's got a Silverclaw Griffin on turn 4, and he's bringing the beats with his Loam Dweller. Luckily, he doesn't have any arcane spells right now. I think he's got some in his deck, but yeah, I mean, I've got all these cards in hand because I played that Divination. Luckily, I drew the third land, which allowed me to cast the Divination on turn 3. If I didn't draw that land, I probably would have just lost the game on the spot. I was really hoping that he would tap out on turn 4 for that Defender again, and that I would be able to get him again with the Ogre Gatecrasher. But he just had the Silverclaw Griffin, which is probably better for him in this spot because he wants to be aggressive. So he's going to be able to hit me down to 13 with his Flyer. Can't really do much about it. I don't have any Flyers that can contend with him other than Dominus, I don't think, because that thing is 3 power, first strike. It's really hard to deal with in the air. It's like reach creatures usually have more toughness than power, so they can kind of deal with first strike pretty well. But Flyers, like, they're not really usually built that way. I guess I have Maze Glider in my deck too, which can deal with it. But yeah, I'm just going to hit him with, instead of trying to deal with his creature, I'm just going to start trying to race with mine. So I'm going to drop a Berserkers of Bloodridge. And unfortunately for my opponent, he didn't really have a better play than to just crack the Cluestone. But then again, I mean, that's part of the reason for these things. They accelerated out his 5-drop, and then when it was useless, he didn't need it anymore. He just cracked it for a card. So it was definitely still okay, but not great for him. So obviously he can't bring the Loam Dweller since I've got the 4/4 back this turn. It's not going to be back for many turns. But yeah, I mean, I've got 7 power on the board that he can't really block unless he's got something good for me. But he's just going to continue to attack. It's really useful that he's attacking, because if he didn't, then I wouldn't be able to bring my Gate Crasher. But at the same time, it was a good play on his part, because he's putting me on a pretty quick clock, and if he's got some life gain spells, then that can really help him in this kind of race. But I think I drew like the worst possible card for me in this situation. So I just draw a Maze Glider, which is so awkward because I have 5 mana out, and and one of them is the Desolate Lighthouse, so I can't cast Dominus. But instead, I mean, I still have this Ogre Resistor, and at this point in the game, it's pretty obvious that I do have an unsummon, because otherwise I would just equip up one of my creatures with Bone Splitter before attacking last turn. And honestly, that might still have been the play. I was just scared of some random aura or something like that. But anyway, my opponent's going to play Sen's Enlistment, which normally wouldn't be that bad, except he's ahead on board, so I have to keep playing spells to catch up. Although, I guess last turn I didn't really have to do anything. I could have just equipped my Bone Splitter and held up Dissipate. And now that the more that I think about it, the more that I think that play was definitely the correct play. But again, I don't draw a land, which really sucks, because I just need to draw any land in my deck so I can cast Dominus and just get this game over with. But since Berserker's already has to attack, I just decide to attack with everything. And his Loam Dweller still isn't going to be able to get in, since I'm going to have this Shimmering Glasskite. Again, I think if I had just played this game a little bit differently, then I would be so far ahead right now. If I had just held up the Dissipate, since I do have 7 power to his 5, then again, he can start attacking with the Loam Dweller, but then I have Dissipate for his next turn, or Unsummon, whichever is more important. Dissipate would have been more important since he was just playing a Sen's Enlistment. Get that thing exiled so he can't retrace it anymore. But now, the situation that I'm in, I have to keep committing creatures to the board. So he's going to play a Suture Priest, which is a super timely draw, because he's got more Sen's Enlistment time. So, yeah, he's going to gain 2 life. And if I want to play creatures and commit more to the board, then I'm going to take some damage. And yeah, here he decides to pull on the brakes and not attack in with his Silverclaw Griffin, which I think might have been a mistake. He could have taken me down to 4. I really wouldn't have been able to do much about it. I mean, I guess I could have just unsummoned it. I think maybe I would have done that in this situation, just so that I wouldn't have to go down to 4/3 if I want to play my Dominus. But yeah, that actually could have been really bad. But since I can't leave up Unsummoned, since I have to tap my 5 colored lands to play the Dominus, I'm just going to equip the Bone Splitter to Dominus, because I can't equip it to the Shimmering Glasskite, and Dominus is the only thing that has flying. So if you notice in the game, I forgot to attack with my Berserkers of Bloodridge here, which is actually pretty bad for me, because I really wanted to attack with it. It's pretty good for me, because he basically just has to chump block. He can't, I mean, he also could play block with the 2/2 and the 2/1/1s, but that's not so good for him, because he needs a win condition. He needs a way that he's going to win the game, because right now I'm so far ahead because of my Dominus. I can just kill him in the air next turn, even after the Sen's Enlistment life gain. And yeah, I mean, I think at this point, or around now, I'm like, oh wait, I forgot to attack with my Berserkers of Bloodridge. What do you want to do about that? And I mean, I think obviously the play is to just leave it, because I mean, I forgot about it. So and it's beneficial to my opponent. Even if we would rewind, it would be up to him, because we already progressed through the game state a little bit. So yeah, anyway, my opponent looks like he's got a Vastwood Gorger and maybe a very important spell that you guys will see in just a second in his hand. But yeah, so I've got basically lethal on board, since I can just steal his Silverclaw Griffin and then just charge in with my flyers, and I also have to bring the Berserkers of Bloodridge, but it's definitely still pretty good. I draw another mountain, which is actually pretty relevant, since I've only got 2 islands, which means that I can't cast Dissipate plus Unsummon this turn. I can only cast one or the other. So it doesn't put me in a great spot, since I don't really want him to resolve any spells, since some spells can be very important, like gain 8 life even at this point in the game could be the difference between me winning and losing. So I'm just going to bring my flyers, and he's just going to drop a Crozen Grip on my Bone Splitter, and I'm like, I've got to Dissipate. Oh no, that thing is a Crozen Grip. and it's got split second, so I can't counter it, which is really bad, especially since I showed him that I have a Dissipate, and definitely puts me in a bad spot, considering he can just swing back for lethal if I don't have a creature here. So I'm just going to hit him. He's obviously going to chump block the Berserkers and take 9 damage, I believe. Yeah, 9 down to 2 life. So obviously that Suture Priest was so crucial in this game, and I'm in a pretty bad spot. I need a creature just to even stay alive here, because he can hit me with the Silverclaw Griffin, which is 3 damage, and then I can chump block the Loam Dweller, and maybe, or I can block and kill the Loam Dweller and the Suture Priest, but then I'm still going to be taking lethal damage. And if I play a creature, then it has to be a flyer so that I can block the Silverclaw Griffin, because otherwise there's no point in playing a creature that's just going to block a regular thing, because I'm going to take 1 from the Suture Priest. Luckily for me, I have an Ensouled Scimitar, which doesn't even count as a creature in that when it enters the battlefield it's not a creature, so I don't lose a life, and it also flies, so I think it flies, right? Yeah, it flies. Of course it flies. But anyway, I have blue, red, colorless up. I don't know why I left the stupid... I guess the Desolate Lighthouse leaving it up makes sense at this point, since if he doesn't do anything, then I can just loot at end step. But yeah, I'm not really sure what that green card is in his hand, but it looks, I don't know, it looks sort of like a life gain. It might be the Phytohydra, I don't really know. But anyway, he's just going to attack with everything, and for some reason I don't animate my Scimitar. I don't know why I don't see that I can just block his Silverclaw Griffin here, but I basically put myself in a position where Unsummon has to resolve in order for me to win, and my opponent has to not have like a Giant Growth or something like that. What I should have done was Ensouled Scimitar to block something, and then unsummon if he had Giant Growth. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the draft. I ended up winning, obviously, and it was some really close games, some really interesting games. I think it was less to do with the fact that I built a good deck and more to do with the fact that I drew Dominus of Fealty a lot, and that was a sweet card. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed playing this, and I hope that I get to do one soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed. Have a wonderful day. Bye.